A very big welcome to you all and to Jane's Walk 2021. It's lovely to see so many faces already. I think we're 50 here, but I know that we actually booked out online 100 bookings in advance. So I'm hoping that more people are to come and they're not struggling to get in. In a minute, it'll be my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Charles Debenham. But I want to say a few words first about the festival itself. I know a lot of you are very familiar with Jane's Walk Festival, but also there will be people here who are fans of Charles or interested in Charles's work, who have come in from that angle, if you like, and perhaps aren't so familiar. So although I don't want to say much, just a few words of introduction. For the second year, this can't quite be the Jane's Walk Festival that we love and that we hoped for. As it sounds, Jane's Walk is a walking festival. It's actually an international weekend of local walks, which honours the Canadian urbanist, writer, activist, Jane Jacobs, a remarkable woman and great thinker she was born in 1916, died 2006, aged 89. And the festival always takes place over the first weekend in May because it marks the anniversary of her birth, which is or was on May the 4th. This year we do, though, hope to and plan to return to a real walking festival later this summer. We don't have a date for that yet. We're still kind of watching how things play out, but in July or August, I hope. I'll keep you posted about that. I will put in the chat box during this meeting my contact information, my email, but otherwise we have a Jane's Walk Colchester Facebook page, and I also post information about the festival on our website, Walk Colchester website, so you can look there as well. Back to tonight, and in the spirit of good things coming out of bad, we have two great evening events over the next couple of days, two virtual walk and talks around town in the company of prolific and much admired local artists, Charles Debenham tonight, and on Monday evening, Nicola Burrell, which perhaps wouldn't have come about otherwise. Of course, the fact that both artists make our local built landscape their subject matter makes very nicely and neatly for a virtual walk. But for me, the bigger motivation behind the two talks lies in the interesting ways, as I see it, that the work of both artists resonates with some ideas that are central to Jane Jacobs, even if in relation to very different contexts and different times. To mention just a couple, the interest both artists have in ordinary aspects of buildings and spaces over their prettier facades, which has parallels for me in Jacobs' interest in how places work over how they look, the beauty that she found in the functioning of things. Just going to mute all again. I don't know why that keeps happening.
I think people want to get in from the waiting room.
Okay. I think it's when people join us from the waiting room. That's probably why. Anyway, yes, the beauty that Jane Jacobs found in the functioning of things, in their machinery over their higher aesthetics. Secondly, in the importance that both artists place on being local for the kind of detailed observation that really only comes from the intimate knowledge that we have of places by virtue of having lived there over time. Many of you will know Charles and his work very well for exactly this reason. He's lived in Colchester his whole life, and I know that he won't mind me saying that that's been quite a long life already. And pretty much all of that time, he's been painting our local streets. So you're about to enjoy a great body of work. Charles will talk for about 50 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. If you wouldn't mind making use of the chat box to put your questions there as we go, I'll gather them there at the end and put them on your behalf, just for the smooth running of things. If they relate to a specific painting, please do note its number. There'll be a red marker against each painting with a number in it. That just means that if we desire to do so, we can go back to that specific painting and look at it as we take your specific question. At the end, if there's time, or even after we finish, if people want to stay back, there'll be an opportunity for us all to open mics up and to chat directly with Charles as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Charles, who's ably supported by his techier sidekick, his son Carl, who you may also get to meet fleetingly. So yes, over to you now, Charles. Hopefully this is going to work.
This Misguided tour, I probably titled that wrong by looking around. I think that should be a mouse-guided tour. Anyway, you'll see the reason for that remark. Being the phobiest of all computer phobes makes me the ideal conductor to mislead you on this magic carpet-like misguided tour, and departing, as tradition has it, from the Golden Place, the Chinese chippy down in North Station Road. Now, I think place names, even with an extra I, add a little bit more interest to the scene. We then move on to Middleborough and begin to lurch about some of Colchester's less romantic areas. Pausing occasionally for a few backward glances into time. And then we end up, like a lot of my fans around St. Bottle's Corner, but be warned, occasionally you may find that you feel or begin to feel like you're one of those jurors on a scene of crime tour. So now we start. That is when I can turn the page. My career in art all started with failure. At grammar school, I was a total failure at maths and algebra. Physics and chemistry were all Greek to me, and my musical muse totally failed me. I was even useless at woodwork. So, with the educational logic of the late 40s, there was only one thing left: bung him in the art room. A chance meeting led me to the Colchester School of Art, then on North Hill, initially part-time, followed by a further 5 years full-time. In those days, there were only about 30 students in total. I think it was Wednesdays that our little group were all thrown out onto the streets with only a dip pen and a cartridge paper pad to record street furniture and the like. Although my actual introduction to the assault course of outdoor sketching began whilst I was still going part-time. One of my teachers, Bill Judge, lived down near Dedham. So one Saturday, I was on my bike down there. I had been working for about an hour when some old bloke, remember I was around 15 at the time, came up behind me, waffled repeatedly, pointed his stick at my effort, and after more waffle, ambled off. He returned a short time later to inquire whether I would like to see his studio. When I later described the studio to Bill, he was amazed. Well, the only horses I knew delivered the milk. And so all those finer points of those stylish, aristocratic, equine portraits were totally lost on me. But I did enjoy my tea and cake with the Munningses, blissfully unaware that my first over-the-shoulder critic turned out to be the president of the Royal Academy. 7 decades later, I was painting in Dovercourt when another anonymous critic, or more accurately, drive-by critic, hurled a load of colourful abuse and the remains of his drink at me. The drink was still in the bottle. Both of these incidents show the heads or tails game of chance that you take when you make the streets your studio. There's advantages and disadvantages. Importantly, both get absorbed into your work. The effect of being there, all sealed up in the brushstrokes, the experience, the immediacy of everything, eye, brain, hand, abstracting the noise, the smell, the wet, the cold, the bustle, the whole shebang of the day, all subliminally dragged into your work, along with any wind-blown grip or kamikaze flights. A lot happens when you're plonked on the pavement for hours on end, day after day, in all seasons. You become fair game for every passerby who chooses to linger long enough to see what you're up to. Some share their opinions on all matter of subjects with you. Others pass on much more vital information, like the location of the town's best begging sites, that H block is well harder than E block, and there's some bad stuff going around, and to keep clear of John. All that juicy gossip and goings on are there in your painting, asleep just under the varnish. You have to look on the back of my work to see if I have written down any of the more noteworthy comments, but you will always find the date and the duration of the painting, the month of starting, the year or years, followed by the month of completion. Chance, or more likely, luck, finds me my views. Often, while painting one scene, I get more interested on what's going on behind me, and I end up doing a little neighborhood cluster. Apart from finding a good subject, there are other matters to consider. Will the scenario last? Will all those lovely red traffic cones still be there next week? When the traffic lights change, will I see anything besides the back end of a bus? Is there really room here for me, my stool, my easel, my paint box, and my feet? And then there's always the neighborhood watch, a host of other things to consider, all of which I just totally ignore and carry on regardless. I can only imagine the scene, all of us drawn up outside the Chinese chippy in North Station Road. All those Axminsters, Wiltons and Persians raring to go. But first, let us look at the starting gate, the Golden Place. The Chinese owner came over, looked at my picture, grinned, recrossed the road, disappeared into his restaurant, to re-emerge later carrying a ladder, and began to repaint the entire frontage in brighter and better colours. Moving on towards town, we paused just after we have crossed over the bridge to view the market scene at Middleborough. The market then was a heady mix of muck, blood and straw, smelly, noisy and needlessly cruel. The Newmarket Tavern gave lots of courage to gaitered men with thin smiles and very thick sticks. Moving into low gear, we sweep up North Hill, ignoring all the restrictions, and pull up at the post office to look down High Street at Fenwick's rebuilding W&G. Recorded on the back of this canvas, I have written, painted from the filthiest, smelliest, peed upon pitch. Painted mainly on Sundays with regurgitated flavours of Saturday nights at the Wagon and Horses or Nando's. This was one of those pictures that I abandoned, picked up again, and so you're looking at a whole bunch of Sundays spanning 5 years. Ignoring the one-way system, we press on down Head Street to Debenham's. That's the insolvent Debenhams, and look across the street to Neon Gothic. There are only one or two clues left to tell you that this once grand edifice was the home of post office telephones, and there's no hint that at all that its neighbour was the home of the much-loved Navy and Army stores. Even all that explosion of bright neon has not dimmed the forlorn aspiration of the bloke with the yellow bag eyeing up the young blonde. We now cross over Head Street and shoot up Church Walk to the offices of the Big Issue. Ex-soldiers are waiting in Church Walk for the midday draw at the Big Issue office, hoping to win the choice of the town's best pictures for the afternoon. The man leaning in the doorway is an ex-guardsman, and the Irishman seated in the window finished his soldiering in Colchester. The young man in the red cap took his posing very seriously and, concerned about his portrait, asked, "Why don't you get yourself a nice bit of white paper instead of that dirty old bit of cardboard?" Like the vendors, the Big Issue office has moved on, leaving behind the offensive broken glass defences and the under-admired brown and white tiles of the adjoining little cluster of shops. A little further up, we find the Flaming Gun Tattoo Studio, the scene of my punning title, Gunsmoke. I had to shift every time a vehicle wanted access in this narrow, awkward, and interesting central backwater. On the plus side, the young blonde lady kept me supplied with mugfuls of black coffee on every visit. Her numerous fag breaks made her an ideal model and gave me an appropriate title. And at the very end of Church Walk, behind some heavyweight wrought iron gates, lies the last bastion. Church Walk's jewel in the crown, locked away, hidden from sight. The turreted title serves a dual purpose, as this treasure of a building is now a retirement home. A short flight over St Mary's Church, and we find ourselves in Rawston Road, looking at Merchant Seaman Flanagan's flags. That's him with his grey ponytail peeking out from under his broad-brimmed leather hat. He's just about to enter his front hallway, which, if I remember correctly, is decorated with jazz record cover sleeves. I'm sure he's a great supporter of the RNLI. Hopping across Southway, we arrive at Lowestoft Villa, the first of 4 house portraits I did in Malden Road. Truly, this whole row is like a local family. You can see the likenesses, but the individuality still speaks out. On one of these sessions, I forgot my stool. A local resident came to my rescue, and I continued the session, painting from the comfort of an upholstered armchair. It doesn't end there. 2 sessions on, and I hear a voice over my shoulder. I see you've remembered your seat. Yes, but I've forgotten my watch, and I'm not sure how long I've got on my parking. I returned the watch the next day. Albert Villa. It was on one of those days that I was trying to improve Albert's image that a lady passerby stopped to ask if I was the man who painted all Colchester. After I told her that I still had a few bits to get round to, she gave me her approval and went on her way as she had things to do. The Bird Box is our first gaff, nipping up Alexandra Road to number 67. I was halfway through a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in the Fat Cat when I realized the charm of this view. My enthusiasm was somewhat dimmed when I got outside and realized just how narrow the pavement was. You think charm an odd description for a sex shop, but cover up that fascia and see how much you have been influenced by the words adult emporium. The chap that ran it came out for a fag break every 20 minutes on the dot. but he never crossed the road to check me out. The bird box is in Butt Road, but the only bird box visible from the street is on the trellis by the cottage door. Who knows how many boxed birds of all varieties and antics were on offer inside the private shop. Most people hurried past those blanked out blue windows. I too was hidden from view on the other side of the road, behind the trench rubble, as workmen laid a new gas main. Wellington Street in black and in white. The upper sign acknowledging the dear old Duke's lineage. The other one is on pavement level, approximately at boot level. Whimsical distractions as I strayed from those lovely windows and 2 generations of lampposts. All this was going on around Christmas '07. My normal dress code is between faded casual and tatty. Winter's extra layers do not improve the style. I was desperately cold and I was desperate to finish. My fingers were frozen white. Even my palate was shivering and I could not feel my feet. Come with me. We will give you a nice hot meal. I had been spotted by the ladies working in the kitchen of the Salvation Army, just out of view on the left side of my picture. Hopping over the Folly Wall to the barracks. In the 80s, before the army retreated south, I painted a mini series of all those magnificent solid structures, all proudly drawn up on the parade ground. Returning to town via Crouch Street and memories of the Regal Cinema. Lost regalia. It's all a facade. Gone are the queues that used to stretch down Butt Road. Even Frank Wright's butchers have packed it in. And now, leaving you to look at all that street furniture and a chap doing up his shoelaces. Staying in Crouch Street, we find Dilly's. The flower shop is very attractive at ground level, but the dull upper stories pale into insignificance compared to its neighbour. Okay, dentistry doesn't conjure up the best of images, but when it was the home of Percy King's, needlework, wools, household linen, and ladies' underwear, all that over-the-top fancy balustrade fitted perfectly. A quick flight now across what was Hyderabad Barracks, where we find Lilymar Lane and friends waiting patiently for the number 2 bus underneath the lamppost by the barrack gate. Using a limited palette of only 4 colours, this was the last picture in my tour of barrack gates. Painted in 2010, sitting by the side of the British Grenadier, the pub that is. The 2 things I remember most are arriving one day to find a team cutting down all the trees, and the other of the landlady, still in her dressing gown, passing me a bar stool through the side window, as once again I had turned up chairless. A short hop north over the Garrison Church takes us to Magdalen Street, Saunders Carter territory in my teenage years. Bargain hunt at Saunders Carter and Son. This inner sanctum festooned with memories that no longer exist, gone, along with all the old scrap metal, old doors, old fireplaces, and anything else floggable. Located just across the road was the Baker's Arms, which in the early 50s drew its clientele mainly from nearby lodging houses or the rows of stagnant gypsy caravans crowded into the backyard. If any disputes arose in the Bakers, you had to go outside, but first you had to take your belt and any rings off. I have it on good authority that no one was ever impolite to Mrs. Saunders Carter. As a student, I had my doubts about applying for any temporary membership to this elite establishment. They were all heightened when, as the door closed behind me, all the music stopped, the babble stopped, I stopped, the cards all disappeared, and I wished I could have disappeared. After what seemed an eternity, a croaky voice from over near the bar piped up with, "He's all right, he's only an effing artist." A dash down Brook Street finds us at East Gates. Sundays were the best, fewer trains and less traffic tailbacks and exhaust fumes. Although I was left fuming when, after replying to the question, "Why are you painting that?" the lout sauntered off, muttering, "Colchester's a dump anyway." A quick turnabout and we're heading up East Hill. Well, halfway up at least, to the old auction rooms. Pascal and Cannes, where in the past I made several successful bids to furnish my home. However, in later life, my appreciation of its external aesthetics got me into trouble with its owners. Something to do with planning permission and retaining the image as I had recorded it. A bit further up, the location where, in 1898, a photographer set up his tripod in exactly the same spot along the wall of St. James's Church. His mission to record the arrival of the first car in Colchester. Over a century on, the only changes I can see are that they seem to have plastered over the lower building, added a dormer window, and stuck up a plaque to mark the site of Eastgate. I titled this picture "Overlooked" as a pun on its position and the people it depicts. The little gatherings of Colchester's less fortunate community that plied those steps, lost one of its members the day after I had painted him. That's him on 2 sticks crossing the road. He was found dead in the stairwell of St. Mary's car park. Flaunting the one-way system again, we pause a little way past the Museum of Natural History in the High Street and go back in time to witness the scene after the incident. When I am painting, police cars usually drive past me very slowly with the windows down. This scene started without a single one. Then suddenly they were swarming all over the place. Police everywhere. Then, just as suddenly, they were all gone, leaving behind just 3 of their officers, who seemed to just hang around for the next hour, long enough for me to put them in the picture. I never found out what all the commotion was about. Further along the street, and even further back in time, to 1961, we find the Castle Corner shop. The canopy of the Co-op's St. Nicholas House provided me with shelter from the winter rain. The large windows provided a lot of light and a surprising amount of heat when I pressed my frozen fingers to the glass. The next picture you are going to see was painted from here, on the same spot. The 99 flake. It is summer now, and the year is 2019. It's very busy down here by the entrance to the castle park. Sitting at my easel, I have become an involuntary tourist attraction myself, taking on not just individuals, but whole families and even coach parties. Ever helpful fingers point out all the salient points, and queries are raised, especially on the days when the shop's owner had forgotten to put out the large dummy ice cream. We have only a short step to go before we can take a breather at Andy and Margie's gift. It is far from obvious why I have called this picture Andrew Miller and Marjorie Gave This Seat. The title is taken from the little plaque just visible between the gesturing hand of the young man, exaggerating his prowess, and the bearded guy's beer can. I assumed that the young woman was just interested in getting her money back for the 6-pack she was sent to buy. By the way, the dog's name was Patch. A century and a half ago, you could draw water with joy just down the road. Across the road now to the Café Rouge. My whistling West Indian mate sat on that very bollard, the second from the left, to greet the Queen, and they kindly gave him police protection too. The bollards, not as popular as Her Majesty, were later replaced by some less accommodating barrels. The ground floor aspect has seen a few changes in its lifetime, as generations of owners have left their mark. But above the eye line, a truly imposing, majestic style remains. Oh, and on the left, you can see that helpful co-op canopy. And further along to 18, 12 and 14 at the bus stop. This started off as a fair weather job, but then the rain came down and I was hooked on all those reflections. I do have a little clear plastic shade that keeps the rain off my picture. A wax hat and a mat give me some protection, but in a downpour, you cannot even see the colors when your palette is covered in raindrops. You just have to wait for the rain to ease, turn your palette upside down, give it a good shake and carry on. Or, by the way, the numbers in the title refer to dress sizes, not bus routes. We're nearly up to the town hall now, as we stop to admire Homer at the Hippodrome. The town's Christmas decorations in 2004 were pathetic. The most exciting thing to see was Homer in a Santa suit, sobering up in the mornings as he was re-inflated. My vantage point was the staff entrance to Marks and Spencer's. It takes a lot longer to realize that all that pride and self-assurance bursting out of those facades, clues as to their original identity remain at the top of the building. And turning round, we see the golden, Gothic and golden arches. I have crossed the road, and now it's the Hippodrome's canopy that provides me with shelter. I wonder whether all those people waiting at the bus stop realize that they are being eyed up by a whole flock of griffins up there, roosting in the stonework of the eaves, perched amid all that Gothic revival opposite. Nipping down Trinity Street, at the bottom of Sheergate Steps, we find Charlotte's Corner. Like a lot of my subjects, Charlotte did not hang around long enough for me to finish her portrait. She skipped across the road to Sheergate soon after I had completed the fascia and the purple patch. Thoughtfully, she left some of her furniture behind until the new occupant turned up and painted everything dark green. A certain amount of confusion arose over the days that I was finishing off the phone kiosk and the butcher's. I spent one quiet Sunday explaining my effort to small batches of a boatload of German tourists bussed up from Harwich. Yes, I know it's a barber's now, but last month it was ein Hausmoving Winkel Laden. Incidentally, the two old girls are hurrying off to the loos that you can see on the right. Another short hop along St. John Street finds Pam Schomburg tending the roof garden of her gallery. Art Against the Odds. It's next to the bookies. When you spend hours and hours visually probing the subject, Looking becomes staring as you try to work out just how you are going to translate it all into paint. You become like a pathologist performing an autopsy, searching for clues to put in your report. My diagnosis here is that the original owners of this lot of houses saw a business opportunity and put up a shop in their front garden. Pure speculation on my part. Chances are, though, that their great-grandchildren are probably concreting or tarmacking over their own front gardens now. Well, you've got to put the car somewhere. Reverse gear again. We are back up the steps again and along Old Lane to meet Zeus and lesser gods. I was still on the drawing stage of this scene when Zeus, the deified dog, came trotting along the top of the low crescent-shaped wall fronting the Baptist church. In complete opposite to his breed's reputation, he was the most friendly and obedient dog I had ever met. His owner, Mark, was part of the little group chatting at the other end of the wall. Zeus kept trotting along the wall, greeting everyone as more and more people turned up. The cry of "He's coming!" heralded the mass stubbing out of brandless cigarettes and the disappearance of all beer cans into jackets, as him from the church invited them all to come and enjoy the tea and buns of the church's open door charity. Over to Queen Street now, where we find Kismet and Camera. A view from another churchyard by the War Memorial to see and be seen by CCTV. The beauty of neglect, the elegance in decline, the opportunist fly posting, all help form the perfect patterns, all bordered up in the scene of miserable weather. I hurried to complete this work, as I assumed it would soon be done up. I needn't have bothered. It stayed like it for years. 100 or so meters down Queen Street, we find Dos, Dosh, and Dose. Let us deal with the Dos bit first. I was huddled up under the dripping concrete remains of the stairwell to the footbridge that once straddled Queen Street, when one of my visitors pointed to my picture and said, "Me and my partner hauled a double mattress up there. We was up there all winter before they chucked us out." The Dos bit, with all its tempting bargains and cash attractions, is the centre of interest, while the bland bit of the chemist's wall becomes the Dose bit. Moving a bit further on down Queen Street sees the 3 red brollies. My umbrella was another one of those shop canopies. I had forgotten the name of the music hall that once stood there where I show the open garage door. I've also forgotten whether it was the stage door or the entrance to the gods that still survives. Anyway, it's all obscured, hidden up behind the signs and the traffic lights in my picture. We now enter St. Bottle Street to look at Silk Road. The Turkish restaurant had closed down, so I took full opportunity of the protection offered by the empty entrance to record the scene. I cannot tell you much about the story of this proud edifice. The chip shop, though, is another story. Besides being rechristened several times, I remember it in a former life when it was part of the pawnbroking empire of the Markhams. And as you walked up Vineyard Street, all you could see in the windows was row upon row of pawned bowler hats. Halfway down St. Bottle Street is the best kebab house. I have included myself, or at least my reflection, in the arched windows of the kebab house. Wellham's, the men's hairdresser, plugs in the gap to the side, making full use of all available space. Whilst in the eaves above, two angels keep an eye on things. Heavenly CCTV. No need to tell you where you have ended up. You have now joined Molly and Charles at the underpass. Over the years, I have painted this pub, which has had a few aliases, from every angle. As a student, I made several drawings in the fountain, as it was known then. It boasted a most magnificent solid mahogany horseshoe bar with brass fittings. Suspended above the bar were the original gas lights with their fancy curly glass shades. All were ripped out later as Formica became the rage. And the only signs of any fountains that remained were etched into the glass of the pub's windows. This incarnation depicts a change of nationality, and the banner shows Molly has taken in a lodger, hence the Dickens room. That leaves the underpass with its host of CCTV cameras. Now, imagine focusing on me as I'm painting away there in the middle of the island. I have just corrected another mistake, scraping out the offending color with my scalpel, which I now hold in my teeth, when a plaintive voice behind me asks, "Do you think I need help?" Turning round, I saw a poor young woman whose blouse was completely blood-soaked. The damage was far less than it looked, and I found out later that she was well known for self-harming. There's more than a touch of irony that a short distance away from the same spot as the last sad episode, the tales you lose side of the coin, that I enjoyed one of my most amusing, exciting, and entertaining days painting. Heads I win. Definitely a heads I win. I had already decided that I had taken too long and that I needed to finish this picture off. So there I was, ultra early on a Sunday morning, doing my thing, utterly absorbed in the subject, blinkered by concentration, when all at once I found myself surrounded and serenaded by a quartet of young, tall, and very jolly Eastern European ladies. I believe that they were trying to tell me that they had just finished their night shift. And speaking of finishing, that brings us to the end of our tour. So now it's back to you, Rowena.
Thank you so much, Charles. I can say personally, as somebody that's also born in Colchester and lived here almost my whole life, that your paintings are so evocative for me of the town that, you know, that I also know very well, although I feel like I come to see it differently through the lens of your paintings. But I sort of sometimes think, looking at your paintings, that if they were all mounted on a wall 100 meters away and I walk past it, I'd be able to say at a distance, yeah, that's my hometown. You know, there's something about them collectively that is just so telling of this particular space and couldn't be anywhere else. And I also think that's occurred to me that that what you've created here is just such an important history of our town as well, you know, and we all are indebted to you really for that creation. And I know that your paintings are already in a number of books, which is fantastic, but I'm also really happy that we have you know, the recording of your talk tonight as well. So I'm going to go over to questions. I hope there are some coming up in the chat. I know that there was one, well, there are a few by now, but an early one from Jean Quinn, which I'm going to combine with a question from me because they're kind of similar. And Jean's question was, do you photograph the people in your paintings and then paint them later? And that sort of connected with something I had been musing on, which is that you mentioned early on, you said something lovely about, you were talking about all the elements in your paintings, and you said something about the whole shebang of the day, you know, meaning all of these different elements that have to come together and eventually are fixed in one painting, but in real life are so dynamic. And of course, your buildings at least do remain static and you can return to them, even if that's in different weathers. But your people, I don't think I'd really noticed until preparing for this evening how much people feature in your paintings, you know, that they're such a rich part of it. And of course, they really are just fleeting moments. So I wonder that, you know, there's a technical side of it. How do you do that? And also, how do you choose the people that go on to feature in your paintings? That's a very long question. Sorry.
You would be surprised the number of people that, in actual fact, come and pose for you.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had to point out to people in the past that unless you get in early, you know, once I have established where I want to position people so that they help the picture, shall we say, they come and they pose, and they sometimes are a damn nuisance because I've already established, you know, the pitch, the posing there, and not necessarily. I tick off. Let's start. I tick off the height of a head somewhere, so that I know that everything will be in perspective. So they get a little circle drawn where the head is on the picture. So that's any head can now fit there. And the people are normally, if you look at them closely, you'll see that there are lots of them that are in repetitive pose. In other words, they might be standing at a bus queue or having a conversation, and I can get them in quickly enough. But that doesn't mean to say that literally, if they're moving along, that one person that you're looking at might be, in fact, about 10 people. You know, the head of one person, you know, then the trunk, and then the legs. So they're not necessarily the same guy or gal that's there. But it's interesting that I, in particular, with St. Botolph's Corner, which I had a number of paratroopers coming down there, and little groups of them, and they would all come and pose in front of me doing strongman tactics, you see, and say, put me in, you see. And I would say, well, yeah, fine, okay. Just hold that pose there, hold it for about a couple of hours, and get your kit off. And that would get rid of them. They would go. But yes, a photograph would be an additional tool, but in the main they're just quick sketch pieces, but then of several people, not necessarily one guy. But if they're at a bus stop or anything like that, they are literally put in on the spot. Yes.
It's interesting that you mentioned bus stops, because I started noticing bus stops, and in fact I started counting them, and I lost count of the number of your pictures that feature a bus stop, and so I just wondered if there are specific kinds of spaces like bus stops that you find yourself being drawn to, maybe because that's where ordinary people do come together, gather.
You would be surprised. Besides white vans that pull up in front of me, and buses, and all the rest of it, you'll be surprised how many people actually don't know you're there, or just stand straight in front of you. Yeah, and okay, if they fit, they get put in. Yes.
I've got another question here about your process again, which is a little bit similar to the last one, a follow-up from Maggie Gibbs. How much work is done on your paintings when you get home, or do you sort of return and complete them in situ?
Oh. I do the sketch first, and then I spend the time in the studio is spent transferring the sketch onto the board, but that's when I do all the jiggling about, and what is, you know, artistic license, you know, is not so much leaving things out as where do I put them, and they may not necessarily be in you know, the exact position, but the amount of work in the studio is really, I've painted after a day's painting, I come home, I put the picture up on the easel, I look at it, I see all the mistakes in it, and I scrape probably half of it out and put into my head what I've got to do when I go back. So the studio time is much more about looking at what I've done and correcting it and planning what I'm going to do when I return.
Okay, I have a question.
But in the virtually they are all painted off the spot. Yes.
Yeah. I have a question here from Dawn Youngs, which I'm also going to combine with another of my questions because there's sort of parallels between them. So she asks, is there one part of Colchester that you haven't painted that you wish you had? And I was also just going to reflect on the fact that St Botolph's, you return back and back to, and I wondered if there were other places in town that you're particularly drawn to and that you've done that same thing. So one question is about places you haven't painted yet that you might want to, and the other is about what draws you to specific spots.
Well, firstly, there's a lot of areas of the town where I wish I had painted, and they've destroyed them, or they're now gone. That's the first part. But no, I don't have any favorite things. I find it much more that I do a little series of houses, and then I get fed up with houses, so I do shops, and then and occasionally I have the luxury of an interior as well. So I don't have any favorite areas. No, it's just that I go around and I suddenly think, oh, that's interesting. I'll paint that. And sometimes it's one, I'm virtually in the same spot that I've painted before, but I hadn't seen it from that point of view.
Yeah. Can you, are the places that come immediately to mind? You said, you regret not having painted places that are now lost to Colchester. So
oh yes, 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 yes. In the centre of Colchester, when the centre of Colchester was destroyed, yes, everything, there were some lovely things in the middle there that went, yes, but they've gone. They've gone. That's it.
Yes, that's why it's so important to us that you keep painting as fast as possible. We've got buildings under threat right now, hey?
Oh yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've got another question. I know that there are one or two sort of practical ones about whether your books of paintings are still for sale, etc., which maybe we could come to right at the end. But I'm just going to indulge myself with another of my own questions. It's a sort of reflection, really, on your whole body of work. One thing that occurred to me, that the thing that makes your pictures feel so familiar to me is not just that I recognize the spaces, because sometimes I don't immediately recognize the spaces, but I still know it's Colchester. And I realized a lot of it comes down to the color palette. And so how much maybe that color palette is part of the local vernacular, and I wondered whether you find when you go and paint in different places that actually your color palette changes a little bit.
Well, obviously, there are several factors on this, because as my eyesight has deteriorated, I do have to have injections and things like that into my eye there to keep me going. So I see things differently from a decade ago now. But no, you just get fed up with one set, one color. No, people often ask, do you have a favorite color? And I say, no, only the one that I'm trying to achieve at the moment. it's whatever the scene demands.
Yes. There is one lovely question, which I'm going to just keep for the very end. But before I ask you it, I just thought I would read out some of the comments that people have posted. Hopefully, because this is recorded, we can come back to them. But let me just read some. From Maggie Gibbs, a comment really. I love that you capture the upper facades in such detail. There are so many beautiful buildings in Colchester, but you wouldn't know if you looked only at the ground floor level. In fact, that's a comment that I hear made very often in Colchester, that we don't look up enough. You know, it's just a very beautiful town. Joe Caldwell saying, fantastic, brilliant artist providing a future social history. It's so true. Jeremy saying, this is beautiful. I walk here every day and never see this. Anna from Peru, here joining us from Peru. Hello, Anna. I'm in awe of your shading and lighting. It's mesmerizing, as is your detail. It shows the whole of Colchester in such a nostalgic way for me. And many votes of thanks. What a fantastic tour. Would love to see an exhibition of these pictures. Well, in fact, you do exhibit, don't you, Charles?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Chapel Galleries is a particular place in Chapel, just near Earlscone, on the way out to Earlscone. Do they have your work permanently exhibited there, do you know?
Well, not permanently, but they do act as my agents.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do they sell your books as well? Are there places where we can?
No, the Red Lion bookshop.
Red Lion, of course. The
Yes,
Red Lion.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that final question. I think it's the final one. Oh, hang on a minute. There's some more here. I'm so sorry. Okay, well, this is the one I was talking about. Comes from Charlotte O'Brien, but it's on behalf of Henry, age 6. Great-grandson Henry, age 6, asks, how do you make your paintings so fantastic? Because I want to do it too.
You have to fail at maths. Oh.
Hope Henry heard that. Are you painting anything in Colchester at the moment? Have you got a picture on the go? Great question.
I am not active in Colchester at the moment, but here's one I did earlier. This one is a very recent one, not quite complete, but it is Bures. So there you go, Bures.
Beautiful.
That's a bit.
So are you still working on this one? So you said it's not quite.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one is titled Fid Def. FIDDEF, which appeared on all pre-decimal coinages and was defender of the faith. So hence the church and the pillbox.
Beautiful. You're just waiting for a chance to get back out there, finish it off.
Yes, I can't guarantee that I would get any dancing ladies, but I am desperate to finish it. Yes.
Another question from Anna. What is the time span of all these wonderful paintings?
They mainly take about anything from if you think of a day sketching, a day transferring, and then individual days of painting, but with drying times in between, but individual days of painting, anything from 12 to 15, and the larger canvases, in proportion, really. Yeah.
And over how many, if this isn't a cheeky question, over how many decades do these paintings span?
Oh dear.
what we've been looking at
It
today.
is
collection.
coming up. I started when I was 15, so I'm nearly 88 now.
And
So
you've been painting Colchester that whole time.
yes, yes. You saw a lot of those sketches that you saw of the Fountain Hotel and the Gypsy Caravans were my teenage sketches.
Wow. Mhm. Well, relatedly, I have a question. This is actually from my sister, Maggie Gibbs. As the years have rolled by, have you experienced diminished enthusiasm for your subject? This is somebody who's moved away from Colchester.
Oh.
And have you repeated the exercise elsewhere?
Yes, well, obviously I've painted a great number of Sudbury scenes of Sudbury, but I I don't restrict myself to Colchester. No, no, we go all over. In fact, I spent a lot of the last part of the century, the 90s and 80s, with my friend Andrew Dodds, and we would be venturing up as far as Norfolk and all over, yes, and down to Cornwall and the Peak District and Yorkshire. So no, it's not just local, but
No.
they were more busman's holidays for us. Yes.
And a question from Robin Dury. Charles, do you ever get up in the morning and decide not to go out because of the weather?
Never. No. I just go out and do a bad weather painting.
Got a couple of comments here. One from Jo Caldwell, who says she loves showing this book to customers at the Red Lion Books. I'm not surprised. And from Penny Benedetti, I love looking through your book of paintings. It's very precious to me, not a book I'd ever get rid of. And Jill Jackson is saying that she saw you in Bures. Actually, this relates to one of my questions. I wasn't sure whether to stop and speak or whether that would disrupt your thinking. I'll say hello next time. And that's funny, Jill, because I had this conversation with Charles myself, because I've passed you a couple of times over the years before I'd met you and really wanted to come up and talk, but thought I would be interrupting you, and that must happen all the time, and you must get frustrated by it. And you said completely the opposite.
Yes, absolutely so. Don't be frightened. I must admit that my little story, and it's very true, there are literally hundreds of people that I have said, well, okay, I'll paint you if you get your kit off. And I live in fear of the day somebody takes me up on that. Well, are there any volunteers? Put your hand up now. Yeah.
My hand's definitely staying down. Another question from Jeremy Warren saying, I love cryptic messages in paintings. This is with reference to Fid Death. Do you like to leave hidden meaning in your work?
Sorry?
Do you like to leave hidden meaning in your work?
Oh, that is absolutely oh yes, definitely yes. Yes. I think my picture of the Andrew Miller and Marjorie gave this seat actually is probably a good example to make of that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's Henry's painted.
You know, Charles, I'm thinking that I should draw things to a close, because my concern is that I booked this Zoom for an hour and a half and we advertised an hour and a quarter, and I'm worried that it might run out in 8 minutes or so and we won't have had a chance to thank you properly. So what I'm going to suggest is that we unmute ourselves so that we can give you a proper thank you, but then we won't go anywhere. We can carry on chatting. and we'll say that's the formal end of the meeting. But anybody who would like to stay back and continue to chat, perhaps ask you questions directly, is very welcome to do so. So could I ask you all to unmute yourself, and let's have a round of applause. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't realise the cams did that. They seem to be rotating through our pictures, or that's what's happening for me as we're clapping, which is lovely. And can I also just
Thank you.
very quickly about Monday's event? So that's the paintings, sketches, and well, drawings and sculptures of Nicola Burrell, who also
Lovely.
is born and bred Colchester, has painted here her whole life. Completely different outcomes, but also a fantastic, inspiring artist. That's at 7 p.m. There are still a few places left, but it is filling up very quickly. So if you're interested to come along, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will have signed up for both at the same time. So
I didn't sign up for that.
but anyway, would you like to put a question directly to Charles rather than via me? Now is your chance.
When are you coming to Sudbury, Charles?
I'll be probably back there next week.
Right. Book you into Starburgers, I think.
Yes.
I'm just reading a comment here, Charles, from a Juliet Maxim. I seem to see echoes of the Impressionists Van Gogh and Atkinson Grimshaw in an early painting. Are these amongst your early influences?
Definitely not. No. The only interest, the only thing that I might have in common with Van Gogh is that our appearance in our physical appearance, and some people crossing over the road to avoid us.
That's funny. Anybody else? Because I can easily jump in and end up continuing with my own questions. I will ask something then, Charles. I sort of meant to end on it anyway. It's just about the importance of being local. I said something about that at the beginning, and how I know it's important to you, and it sort of connects with ideas of Jane Jacobs. But I read somewhere that you once said that you literally did not think that you could paint in the way that you do, Colchester as your subject matter, if you hadn't lived here so many years and you weren't so familiar with it. And I just wondered if that's something you could reflect on a bit more.
Well, like I tried to put over, is that there, for me, every time I look at one of my paintings, it's like a page from my diary. I'm literally back in that time. I can mainly recall anything really interesting that has happened, while I was on that particular painting. You're decades back, and just memories come flooding back there. And it's the thing about everything being just under the surface. And I suppose that exists in my brain to paint. So that when I'm painting.
Oh, hang on 1 minute, Charles. Charles, hang on a second, because I just need to unmute you. Could you unmute yourself?
Go, it's done.
Yeah,
Great.
I'm free again. I'm speechified, am I? Yes. So, and did any of that come across? None.
No, some of it did. I just I was asked to mute people again just because it was.
Oh, right. No. What I was saying is that it's like everything else. You just, there's all this unconscious bit that you're unaware of the influences. But so if you're local, you're used to it, and it's all there. Can't explain it, but I suppose if you paint when I'm painting abroad, there, you would tend to go for a more obvious subject, I suppose, and it's just familiarity with something that is ordinary. It's the sort of thing that you would pass by. You walk past every day. You just take it for granted.
Yes, so true. I have one other question here. It's actually not a particularly interesting one. It's just that I noticed that there was only one nighttime painting in this particular collection, and I wondered if it was,
Yes,
choice to paint in the day, was that a significant one?
Well, nighttime painting is for the young. I think that you require good shot windows to give you light onto your thing, and equally interesting subjects on the other side for you to record. But well, definitely, yes. I think it's a young man's game, nighttime painting. Yes, I've done probably about a dozen in my lifetime there. Yes.
Yes.
You remember, you've got to haul all your stuff down there and around. Yes, it's definitely a young man's game, nighttime painting. Yes.
All women's, given that the title of Nicola's talk on Monday evening is night sketches, I've forgotten now, and Hythe drawings. But anyway, all of her sketches of actual Colchester town centre, the first half of her talk on Monday, are all at night. So it's an interesting juxtaposition there.
Oh, yes. Well.
Yeah. I hope you'll be able to make that, Charles, and then get to see her work as well.
Well, I'll ask my son.
It's a day.
Talking of your son, maybe we should just say a quick thanks to Carl as well. Do you want to stick your head in, Carl? Say hello.
Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. What a superb turnout. And I'd like to propose some thanks to Rowena, who's been a splendid compere. Well done.
Thank you. Well, it's been a complete joy to meet up with you in preparation of this and to listen to you tonight. I'll just read out a final comment that's here. It's from Margaret Birkinshaw. Thank you, Charles. That was brilliant. I've worked at Chapel Galleries on and off over the years, and I was given a set of postcards of your paintings. The set is depleting as I send a relevant one to friends when I have a note to write. I love your work and the record of the things that you have painted. That's so true. I must get a collection of your postcards if you have them.
I'm sure.
Stuffing yourself.
Say hello to her if you want. Say hello.
Hello, Pam. What are you eating, Pam?
I think, Pam, you're muted, but you should be able to unmute yourself.
Well, we're eating our dinner and it's very nice and we're enjoying your talk. Thank you, Charles. It's fabulous.
Yes.
You were going to say something, weren't you, Don, about night?
Oh, I like the wet paintings, the paintings in the rain.
You like to see me suffer?
Well, that's probably part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did it take to grow that moustache?
About 40 years.
Yes, I mentioned so. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, and I've never forgive you for getting rid of my picture. I wanted it.
Well, you still have me to thank that I did not do as you returned through the window of your fruit garden and exposed this rather, well, filling the window frame with your posterior.
That's because there was no door. The only way onto the balcony is through the window.
Ah, well, yes, it
And
provided
it was always head first.
just as well for you.
That was a long time ago, Charles.
It is.
So
That
that painting
picture.
is in somebody else's possession now, is it?
That's in America now,
Oh,
yes.
is it? So
Yes.
that brings me on to a question, actually, and that is, like, how many of your paintings are still around and for sale? And, you know, do you have a whole collection at home stashed away?
Oh, yes, there, like everybody, all artists, they're in the collection of the artist is the phrase, for pictures that they haven't actually sold. So yes, roll up, anybody, you may be in for a bargain.
Really, that is an invite, I'm sure. There's people follow up on, I certainly will.
Can I just come in and say I'm with Pam that Charles painted our house and put my husband in the front window, and we couldn't afford it at the time when we saw it. And then when we could afford it and I got in touch with Charles, he'd sold it to a pub. Which pub, we don't know. You know, I've been searching pubs. I'll walk in a pub one day and there will be. We would have liked it. Yeah, too late.
I think this might be a good moment to draw to a close.
Yes.
I'm just going to suggest that everybody unmutes themselves again so that we can actually finish properly with a big round of applause. And I'd just like to say thank you so much again.
We are
A lovely, lovely evening. Are we all unmuted?
Yep.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Charles.
Is that Henry? Yes, it is Henry. Hi, Henry.
Hi.
Everybody.
Okay, so
Look forward to seeing you all on Monday, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you, Rowena.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.